and the benefits of kindness, and even strategies to overcome obstacles in being kind. So the objectives of this presentation are to define kindness, to discuss the benefits of kindness, to describe ways to be kind, how to manage unkind reactions, and to discuss team building. So the definition of kindness is the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate. Some synonyms are like, kind-heartedness, greatness, tenderness, concern, care. So as we get into this, I like this quote by Lady Gaga, who says, "I've been searching ways to heal myself, and I found that kindness is the best way." And that's so true. And I think part of that is when we think about being kind, we take the focus off of ourselves, right? And we put it on someone else. And sometimes that's the healthiest thing we can do. So I want to talk about why kindness is good for you, the person who's being kind. So for starters, being kind releases feel-good hormones. So when we're kind, we have endorphins, and we have things like serotonin and dopamine, which are what we call feel-good neurotransmitters in the brain that light up. So in that way, being kind is good for us as well. Secondly, kindness can ease anxiety. So when we're anxious, we go into fight or flight, and our body is flooded with stress hormones, primarily cortisol and adrenaline. And we don't think as well in that state, and it's uncomfortable. So when we're kind to others, it takes us out of that state of fight or flight. Next, kindness is good for our hearts. It's really important. It can help us live longer. Some other things are that kindness can improve our self-esteem. It helps us feel like we're more capable. If we can make someone else's day brighter, it feels like we have some control over what we do. The other thing is that it reduces stress, kind of going along the lines of that fight or flight, right? When we're feeling overwhelmed. It's good for us in the fact that it can prevent illness. When our body is under a lot of distress, right? Our immune system can be suppressed, and we're more likely to get a virus or whatever's going around, right? So this is also a way to bolster your immune system so that you're less susceptible to things. Kindness can also improve our self-esteem. And I think that's because we feel more capable when we're kind. And we know that when we're kind, our behavior is coming from a place of genuineness. We're concerned about being kind and warm towards others, and that it's not really about any type of reward or sense of obligation. It's kind of the spirit of it. It also helps us by focusing on what is good, right? When we're kind, we're connecting with someone and we're focusing on trying to make that person smile or feel good. So we're focusing on what's good in the moment, right? So easy to focus on the negatives in life and what's not going well. I would argue that our brain is designed so that we do focus on problems, right? Our five senses are scanning the environment for what's not working here, right? Instead of what's good. We pay attention to the car accident alongside the road, not the beautiful sunset. So our brains are programmed that way. So if we can take the focus off of that and focus on something positive, that's good. So it also, I think, helps connect with people because we're focusing on that sense of humanity that's in all of us, right? It's not about what their possessions or their achievements. It's just connecting to them on a more human level. So kindness all around is a good thing. There's been a lot of research about kindness lately. So this quote from the Buddhist monk, the Dalai Lama, says, "Be kind whenever possible, and it is always possible," right? So kindness, it's simple. So what are some ways to be kind? Well, a big one is forgiving someone for something that they did, right? A little misconception about forgiveness is that it's primarily for the person you're forgiving, when in fact, forgiveness benefits most the person doing the forgiving, because then you're not carrying all that with you. Yes, the hurt was there and it may be still there on some level, but the resentment and the burden of carrying that pain with you and kind of letting it go by forgiving the person. It's also giving someone the benefit of the doubt. I've heard someone say recently, assume good intentions, right? Like when we assume the best of people, even if they say something a little strange or that might be a little hurtful, assume good intentions. It might be coming from a place of, insecurity or, social clumsiness or what have you. So it's a great practice to assume good intentions of others and give people the benefit of the doubt. Giving a compliment. That's a great way when it's an honest compliment, something that you notice about someone who's doing something well, or they're wearing something that you think is pretty nice. Delivering a compliment is a great way to make people feel good around you. Some of these other things are just kind of common sense, but at work, who doesn't love the person that brings in cookies or something that people like to share, right? Gratitude, saying thank you, right? Another thing that's important for the other person, but also for us, because when we feel grateful, right, it wards off things like anxiety and depression. We're focusing on the moment and what we're grateful for. Saying good morning to anyone who crosses your path, right? You can kind of feel a difference. I don't know, for those of you that have done some traveling, what a difference between going to like a small town or small city where people can kind of say hello, look you in the eye and smile, versus maybe a bigger city like New York where everyone's just in a rush to get where they need to go, right? It's nice to have people say hello and good morning. At work, praising a coworker for going above and beyond is certainly an act of kindness. Leaving a note on a coworker's car wishing them a spectacular day. I think that's a great idea. I've never done that, but I think that sounds like a neat thing to do. Here's a big one, I think, because sometimes things can get negative at work, right? When there's gossiping going around, that can be a difficult situation when our peers are talking about someone else or complaining. You want to be supportive, but, turning the course by saying things about the person who's being, talked about, saying some good things about them, changing the subject, that type of thing. Because just as kindness can be contagious, right? When people are negative and kind of mean-spirited about certain people, that can also be contagious, right? And can bring people down around them, but also, word gets around and the person who's being talked about can feel terrible. So writing a thank you note to your boss or coworker, explaining how they helped you. What a great way to be kind. I actually did this recently. I had a teacher that meant so much to me way back in 5th grade. She's not even teaching anymore because I'm old. But bottom line is, in 4th grade, I was kind of a shy, introverted kid that didn't talk a lot. And I don't even think my teachers thought I was very bright because I didn't say very much. And then in 5th grade, I had this teacher named Miss Conrad, and she used humor as a vehicle to kind of get people to open up. And, she used to pretend like if she was angry, she'd give you the Conrad crunch. And she really encouraged everyone to do their best, but she wasn't very critical when you made mistakes, and she brought the best out, and I think a lot of students. So in the last few months, I wrote her, a note card just to say, hey, just wanted you to know how much you meant to me as a teacher, and that was a turning point in my life, to have you as my teacher. Because I went from in 4th grade, the teacher's thinking like, wow, wonder what's wrong with her. Maybe she has a learning disability, to at the end of 5th grade, I was in the gifted program. So what a difference a good teacher can make, right? Huge difference. So thanking that person, right? Had I not said anything to her, she might not have known the huge difference that she made. So writing her a note, I'm sure that probably put a smile on her face. Another thing, making eye contact with everyone, offering a smile and acknowledging their presence, right? Very different to walk into a room where people don't look at each other and smile versus, people that are warm and welcoming. There's something to be said too about smiling, where, they say it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile, right? But also, when we smile, it benefits the person we're smiling at, right? But it also benefits us, because when we smile, we're lighting up parts of our brain, like the neurotransmitters I spoke about earlier, like dopamine and serotonin, and those are feel-good neurotransmitters. So we feel good, and the person we're smiling at feels good. It's also a good gesture to converse with someone you don't particularly like. Look for something good about them during the conversation. So sometimes, we usually form an opinion about someone in the first 30 seconds, right? Unconsciously, we kind of make judgments, right, about people around us. And there may be someone that at work that, I'd rather steer clear of this person. I don't particularly like them. But when you engage in a conversation with that person and you look for what are some of the common things, what do we have in common, right? Because we all have differences, right? And our personalities don't always mesh. But if we look for what is the thing that we hold in common, right? Oh, maybe we have kids around the same age, or we like to cook, or whatever. Looking for the things that we share, because for most of us, we have more in common with each other than what divides us. So this would be a good time to think of a time someone was unexpectedly kind to you. I'm wondering if anyone feels comfortable with sharing. No judgment here. We're all going to be kind, right, and respectful. And what was that effect on you? So I'm going to share a couple of stories, and then if someone would like to share, that would be fantastic. But this was a long time ago, because now I have a transponder in my car for the tollway. But back when they didn't have transponders, and when you drove on the expressway in other states like Illinois, for example, you had to stop at the toll booth, right, and pay your toll. Well, I was sitting in a line of people waiting to pay their toll. And as I got up to the toll booth, the person in the booth said, "Oh no, go ahead, go ahead." And I said, "What? Oh no, the person in front of you took care of your toll." And I was like, "Oh." Back then it was probably like 40 cents. Now it's like, $2.20. But the point of it is, like, that person, just to be nice, paid my toll and probably tolls of the people behind me. Just a random act of kindness. Another example I can think of is like going to Starbucks for my morning coffee, and I get up to the window and the person in front of me has purchased my coffee and whatever I picked out to eat that morning. Just that random act of kindness. And I remember it was kind of like a thing that everybody was doing, right? So the person in front of me bought my coffee, and then I bought the coffee for the person behind me, and so on and so on. So I think the goal was like, try to keep it going all day, right? Pay it forward. So, Jen, I don't know if you're able to take people off mute. If anyone wants to raise their hand though here, does anyone have an example of a time when someone was unexpectedly kind that they would like to share? Love to hear it. Sure. Ryan.
Yeah. So I remember I moved my freshman year of high school, and I didn't know anyone, and I went to the lunchroom, and I didn't know where to sit, and I sat by myself
Mm,
for about a week, and
mm,
it was less than awesome.
yeah.
So and one day a girl in my grade came over, and she just goes, "Hi, my name's Laura. Would you want to come sit with us?" And
Mm,
she invited me over, and she introduced me to all her friends, and like let me sit down and like ask where I was new and everything. And it was amazing how nice it felt to be seen, and,
yeah.
and to have somebody like notice that and offer some help.
That is an awesome example. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I can imagine back in high school, just sitting there alone at the table, and how relieving it must have felt to have someone be warm and welcoming and invite you to sit at their table. So it's an awesome example. Thank you. Would anyone else like to share? Anybody else have maybe an example of maybe a random act of kindness that came their way? Or an example of maybe when you did something that made someone else feel good, an act of kindness? No? Okay, no problem. Okay, so for each of these scenarios, maybe we can brainstorm several ways that you could be kind. So the first scenario is you ask a coworker how they're doing today, and they just say, "Ugh," you know, you've probably heard that before, right? Like one of those days, like, right? Um, what's in thinking to yourself, what's a way that you could kind of respond to that in a kind way, right? Because you could feed into that, right? Like, yeah, my day sucks and da 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 da, and go on and on. But does anybody have an idea of a way they could respond to that by being kind? Ryan?
Yeah, maybe try to say something along the lines of, it sounds like you're having a really rough day. Do you want to take some time to talk about it?
I like that. Awesome. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that term, mend and friend, right? Um, mend and friend. So it's kind of like when you're there for somebody, right? When they're having a rough patch or they're having a bad day, right? It's a great way to foster the potential for a friendship. If not a close friendship, certainly a work friendship, right? So mend and friend. It's a big one when you can be there for someone when they're not feeling their best.
There's a couple people in the chat, Janine.
Yeah.
One said, just say, "I'm sorry. Is there something I can do to help you?"
Hmm. Yeah.
Or just being present to listen.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, being present, right? Like sometimes when somebody's going through something, right, we don't have magic words to say. We don't know how to necessarily comfort that person. But sometimes just actively listening and being present with them can be the biggest way to be kind, right? So the second one, how to be kind when someone else is not so kind, right? So in this example, your mother-in-law tells you that the shirt you're wearing makes you look fat. So how would you respond to that? And you can do it in chat, or if you, raise your hand on here, I'd love to hear from someone too. How would you respond to someone who's making a comment that's kind of insulting? You know, I guess the point of this is yeah, that's not very nice. Yeah. I appreciate you maybe trying to be helpful, but I would prefer it if you didn't comment on my shirt. Ryan, Erica. Jen, could you read Erica's comment? It flashed by there.
Oh, it just says it's so simple but clear to say that's not very nice. She says that she finds that disarms people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Krista said, well, I like my shirt and I feel good in it.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. So you can kind of stand up for yourself, right? But not have to put the other person down in the process, right? Like, I know I've said, if someone has said something that's a little bit on the borderline of being nasty to me, I would kind of say like, oh, ouch. I kind of like this shirt, that type of thing. So you're not hurting the person. You're just acknowledging that that wasn't a very nice comment. How about this scenario? You hear gossip about a coworker that's not very flattering. And we've all been in these situations, right? Where coworkers are talking about someone, maybe not at this job, but a prior job. How would you guys handle that? When people are coffee clutching or whatever, and they get to talking about somebody on the job. Does anybody have any ideas? Great. Oh, that hasn't been my experience, and then change the subject. I love that, Erica. Kind of standing up for that person, right? Putting your neck out there a little bit. But, when people are talking about other people, the first thing that I think is, ooh, when is it my turn, right? If someone's talking negatively about a fellow coworker, I'm kind of like, ooh, they probably are going to do that about me eventually, right? So, yeah, I like that. Your spouse made a poor choice and you're so tempted to say, I told you so. How do you handle that? So not a work situation, but we do this at home too, right? And sometimes I think we can be the hardest on those we love, right? So how would you handle, your husband did something that, or your wife, right? Whoever did something that you didn't like, and you just want to say, I told you so. I warned you about this. We discussed this. What would be a kinder way to approach that, maybe? I think sometimes it's we have the need to want to be right instead of looking for consensus when it comes to our relationships. So, maybe it's like, it's you made a mistake, it's going to be all right. We're going to move forward, that type of thing, right? Instead of beating the person up, right? Because most people beat themselves up enough anyway. So this quote by Bob Carey is that unexpected kindness is the most powerful, least costly, and most underrated agent of human change. So it's a pretty powerful quote, right? How important kindness is, right? And it doesn't cost anything. but it's not always easy, right? When we're not feeling our best, or someone really irks us or says something mean-spirited, it's not always easy to be kind. But like any habit, right? Like kindness is a muscle that the more we flex it, the stronger it gets, right? So hurt people, right? So when I mentioned earlier about assume good intentions, this also plays into that, right? When someone is kind of nasty, right, and is hurtful, you know, not to take it personally, because it's often not about us. It's not about you, right? Have you ever said something because you're hurt and angry and you didn't mean it, but you took it out on someone? I think we've all done that, right? And what if the people that are unkind to us are really the ones who are suffering the most? What could you do to change that trajectory, right? Does anybody have any ideas? Like if someone was kind of said something mean, right? But consider that when someone's reaction to you is their anger level or their level of disrespect or frustration doesn't match the situation at hand, then what you can assume is they're bringing something else into this. It's not about me. There's something else going on that they're bringing into the current situation, and to not feel responsible for it, right? But to acknowledge this person is hurting right now. The backpack. So 90% of people's reactions are about them and not you. So we can assume that they have tough things going on in their life that we know nothing about, and to give them a break when they're having a bad day, right? So assume good intentions, right? Like when someone is not so kind, right? It's not about us. It's about something that's going on in their life, something going on with them, right? To not take things really personally. Another quote I like by Michael Watson is that strong people don't put others down, they lift them up. So it feels good to make people feel good too, right? Helps us and it helps them. So kindness says a lot about your character, right? When you think about some of the character traits of people that we don't like, you know, they could be really boastful, rude, self-centered, that type of thing, right? So kindness really kind of tells us a lot about a person, right? Because there's a lot of things when people are kind that it's an example of, right? Like being kind is being friendly, being honest, being generous, right? There's a lot of things tied into kindness. So it is a reflection of someone's character when they're kind. Kindness is about practicing positive traits. So keeping positive traits and values at the front of your mind. So we have a thing called affirmations, you know, that we sometimes like to use to kind of think about things and think about ourselves in a more positive light, right? But you could post those. Other ways to foster this kindness trait is, you know, to find a TED Talk that inspires you about how to do that, or talk to someone about it, right? But give yourself opportunities to practice kindness. A part of kindness consists in loving people more than they deserve. That's Joseph Joubert. So if someone is not particularly kind to you, right? Sometimes, you know, being kind can be very disarming to that person, right? They might be assuming the worst and behave that way. And sometimes we can be the bigger person and be kind, even if someone is not always that kind to us. So kindness isn't something that's easy, right? Sometimes it's easier for people to say stay small and closed off. It's easier to be sarcastic because being sarcastic doesn't require you to stretch, right? It can, it doesn't require anything of you. So kindness is something that takes strength, it takes muscles, takes courage, right? There's always the chance that you're kind and that person doesn't reciprocate, right? Takes a step out of your comfort zone, maybe, to be kind to someone that you find difficult, or their personality is, grates on your nerves or is kind of harsh. So kindness takes courage. So there's nothing, there's nothing weak about being kind, right? Kind is courageous. So if you want to be kind, but you're not really sure how, we talked about some ways like random acts of kindness and smiling at people and making eye contact and making small talk or being present when they're struggling with something. But, the first cardinal rule is to start with doing no harm, right? So, it's doing the things like that some people do on social media, right? Which is, anonymous, posting something negative out there, right? Post something kind instead, right? Something uplifting, not something nasty about someone, right? When we're angry, there might be a temptation to want to rant about something or berate someone, but typically that anger goes away, and saying something or doing something like that, we often regret it after the fact. So when we're not feeling like being kind because we're really stressed out or we're angry or upset about something, right? One of the best things that we can do is just take a moment and focus on our breathing, right? There's a type of breathing that most of us, I would say, unless you're trained maybe in yoga or you're a singer that's been trained to sing this way, it's called diaphragmatic breathing. And basically, what that entails is, instead of breathing kind of with a shallow breath, which is where we fill our lungs partway with air, right? Maybe halfway with air, where we're breathing through our chest. Diaphragmatic breathing is where we take in a deep breath through our nose, we hold it for a couple seconds, and we exhale out our mouth for a few seconds. So the inhalation through the nose, the exhalation through the mouth. And what should be happening is your diaphragm, which is in your core, right? Your stomach should inflate when you inhale and deflate when you exhale. That's how you know you're engaging your diaphragm in the breathing. If that's not happening, you might be slowing down your respiration by taking deeper breaths, holding the breath, and exhaling, but you're likely not breathing through your diaphragm. And the reason that this is important is when we start to get really angry or anxious and our body gets into that fight or flight, it's actually fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. But when we get into one of those stages, right, sometimes something as simple as diaphragmatic breathing can take us out of fight or flight and into what we call rest and digest, which is where we do our best work, right? When we're not stressed out, when our body is not flooded with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. We do our best work and we feel our best when we're not in fight or flight, right? This is not to say that we can prevent fight or flight all the time, right? It is a survival mechanism, and certain things will trigger fight or flight, right? But typically what triggers that stress response is not life-threatening, right? It might be a snarky comment, someone's body language, a certain look they give you, waiting in line, right? They're not life-threatening things, right? So to take us out of fight or flight, focusing on that diaphragmatic breathing to get more oxygen to our brain, to slow down our respiration, taking us out of fight or flight, right? And interestingly, when you breathe using your diaphragm puts pressure on a nerve in your body called the vagus nerve. And that nerve is responsible for the relaxation response. So in yoga and things like that, they use a lot of postures and focus on breathing that really involves that vagus nerve. But you can do it with something as simple as breathing properly. So I would encourage you, if you're not familiar with diaphragmatic breathing, to watch. There's tons of YouTube videos out there, to just Google it and practice doing it a few minutes at night. Do it when you don't need it, because then you'll remember how to do it when you do need it. If you wait until you're stressed out to do it, right, that's not always the most effective way. But to learn how to do that type of breathing so that when you need it, it's there for you. Another way to manage unkind reactions, right? When you have a reaction to someone, a visceral reaction, or they've said something that's offensive, right? Is just to breathe or to count, right? Like you've probably heard this, wait 10 seconds before you respond or something, right? Because sometimes if we respond in the moment, right, we're in reactive mode, right? We're in fight or flight, which means we haven't really thought through everything. Our prefrontal cortex is not fully engaged, right? So that's what happens when we're in fight or flight. It's all reactionary. It's the oldest part of our brain, the lizard brain, which is, not engaged in learning and organization or any of that type of thing. So just giving ourselves a moment to center ourselves, right? To calm down before we respond can make a huge difference. Distracting ourselves too. Like if we're just really, really upset and we can't, we've tried other things, sometimes just distracting ourselves with something. It could be music. It could be, looking around. There's a thing we call 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You may or may not have heard of it, but it's like how to engage our 5 senses to ground ourselves and forget about whatever it is that is upsetting us in the moment. So it's looking around the room. What are 5 things that I can see, right? What are 4 things that I can hear? What are 3 things that I can feel, right? And when you think about these things, like what can you hear? You can hear maybe the fan in your computer, right? Which is what I'm hearing. You can hear the HVAC system in your office. You can hear someone's voice in the distance, right? For things that you can feel, 3 things you can feel. You can feel the texture of your sweater or your hair, right? Or a surface that's cold, right? Even bringing in our sense of taste, right? We all have a taste in our mouth, right? So our skin is salty. So bottom line is using our 5 senses to both ground ourselves and distract us from the thought that we're having that is making us upset in the moment. Another way to do this is by visualizing. So when we're in that fight, flight, or freeze, it's called sympathetic nervous system response, right? What happens is our heart starts to race, right? Stress hormones are flowing through our body. The blood flow that is typically in the core of our body gets diverted to our arms and legs so that we can fight or run, right? So think about it back in hunter-gatherer times. We either had to flee from the predator, the lion, the bear, whatever, or we had to fight. So we're not thinking through things and rationalizing. We're in fight or flight, right? So if we can think about a guided, like a visualization of a place that makes us calm and serene, for me, it might be, sitting on a beach somewhere, right? For you, it might be in the mountains or something, but like thinking of that place and trying to engage your senses and what does it feel like when I'm standing on the beach and I feel the sand between my toes, the warm sand between my toes, right? I hear the ocean waves. I smell the salt and, Like the ocean has like that seaweedy kind of smell, right? So like really engaging your senses when you're doing a visualization. Another important piece of this is gratitude. So when life can be stressful, right? We've all got a million things going on. But in the chaos of life, focus on what's good, what matters, and appreciate it, right? Gratitude, there's been a lot of research about this as well, how important it is, right? Because there's plenty of things we can focus on that will bring us down, right? We could watch the news. I mean, everything on the news is pretty negative, right? But looking for the things in life that you can feel good about, right? I sometimes tell clients, like, when you first wake up, write down 3 things you're grateful for. Before you go to bed, 3 things you're grateful for. We can all find at least 3 things we're grateful for. We're alive, right? We have our health, we're breathing, right? But, it can be little things like, oh, I'm grateful for a sunset, or I'm grateful for, my daughter smiling and laughing. It can be anything. But finding what you're grateful for in life is really important. So kindness to yourself, this is really important, right? Some of us are really, really good at being kind to other people, but not so good at being kind to ourselves, right? So kindness and self-care, that makes us more resilient and able to withstand things that are difficult in life. So it's how we treat ourselves physically by eating healthy, right? What we eat makes a huge difference. Exercise makes a difference, right? Moving our body. There are studies that show that, the efficacy or the effectiveness of exercise can be similar to an antidepressant, right? So how huge is that to do something that's naturally good for us that can ward off things like anxiety and depression, right? It changes the way the brain works. Shutting electronics down and going to bed at a reasonable time. So, some of us might be on our phone or computer right before bed. And the problem with that is the light from electronics when we're on that keeps our brain awake for about an hour after we try to go to sleep. So if you find yourself fighting sleep and it's taking a while to fall asleep, a good first step would be to remove any electronics for at least an hour before you go to bed. Other things are long-term self-kindness. So pay attention to things in life that may show that you're having difficulty coping with things and turning to negative ways to cope, right? So using too much alcohol or drugs, right? Getting into things that are more addictive, like compulsive behaviors. So we have what are called addictions, and then we have things that are called process addictions. And people can also get addicted to things like, shopping, overeating, pornography, gambling, right? Those are process addictions. Video games for some people, where they're on there so much. So also ignoring your physical and mental health, right? If we want to be there for others and be kind and productive, right, we have to take care of ourselves. So focusing on our health, our relationships, and not making our job everything, right? Like, hopefully you're in a job that you like and you like coming to work and, using your skills, talents, and abilities to do things, right? But our life is not all about our job, right? We need to have a life outside of work, right? Many of us are parents, have children, have other interests and passions in life, right? So making sure that, you have things that it's not all about work, right? Because that leads to burnout. So in summary, we kind of talked about what kindness is, the benefits of kindness, how to manage people's unkind reactions, ways to be kind. And the thing we didn't really touch on, I think, is, how to use kindness to do some team building, right? So, sometimes, at work, doing things where we're inclusive and we're treating people with kindness and making it, a positive experience, right? A place that people want to go to, right? Um, you know, the whole not talking about people behind their backs and treating others with kindness, right? I don't know about you guys, but like, I love to go to work if, people are bringing in like cookies or we're having a potluck or something like that, right? Or maybe it's just, the sidebar, short conversations about things like, being there for your coworkers and things like that. So you really can foster an environment that is welcoming and kind, and that can make a huge difference. Sometimes more than the job itself, right? Is the type of environment you're working in, the people you're working with, whether those people are kind and supportive or not so much, right? Can make a huge difference. So in closing, I'm wondering, in what ways will you commit to being kind to yourself today, right? So we want to be kind towards others, right? But we also want to be kind to ourselves. And in saying this, I think a lot of times we are our own worst critics, and we spend a lot of time beating ourselves up about things, right? Falling short of the mark in some way, right? And one of the best ways to be kind to ourselves is to show ourselves compassion, self-compassion. So when we think about being kind to ourselves, sometimes that's really hard to do. So thinking of yourself like you would an elderly grandparent or a small child or someone who is struggling, think about the ways you treat those people, right? The kindness you show, the patience, right? And then turn that same kindness towards yourself, right? Because sometimes it's very difficult, right? And a lot of people struggle with really having this negative self-talk, right? Where they're kind of mean to themselves, right? And they beat themselves up. And that's not helpful, right? We all have things we want to achieve. And I don't know about you guys, but I've never met a perfect person, right? So when we fall short of our own standards, right, to kind of, brush it off, pick ourselves back up and keep going, right? So two things there is, self-compassion, right? It's about being kind to ourselves, forgiving ourselves, being compassionate with ourselves when we fall short of the mark, right? Brushing ourselves off, getting back there, being resilient, and engaging in self-care, right? So the things I talked about earlier, taking care of your physical health with eating well, exercise, taking care of your mental health. The EAP is here for you if you're struggling with something, whether it's, something work related or whether it's something at home or, a mental health concern that you have, whether it's, parenting issues or something going on with, an elderly parent or a child in your home. Use the EAP as a resource to help if you're dealing with things that are stressful and might be affecting how you feel. That's a way to take good care of yourself too, because your mental health is every bit as important as your physical health. And in fact, they're all connected, right? The brain and the body, they're really all one thing. So really important to take care of your mental health. Makes you more strong and resilient. And when you're feeling good, you're more able to be kind to others and make them feel good. So I leave you with thinking about, what's one way that you'll commit to being kind to yourself, right? How are you going to show yourself some kindness today? So think of 2 ways today that you'll make an effort to demonstrate kindness at work. This is kind of a takeaway little, I guess, homework assignment, but if you could write down 2 ways that you'll make an effort to be kind at work and share it with one of your colleagues or coworkers, and you guys can use each other those of you that know each other or work in the same department, use each other as partners to commit to what you're doing. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys making the time today to listen to this and participate. I really appreciate some of the comments. They were really insightful. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Our website, eap@ascension.org, if you need to reach out to us. We're really good about getting people in quickly, whether it's via video or in person. So take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.